Hey folks, good morning and welcome to this episode of Motorcyclist MC Commute. Today we're going to be riding Aprilia's 2021 RSV4 Factory Superbike. Now we did an MC Commute on this motorcycle from WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca during the official US press introduction, but the audio was kind of crummy, so we're doing it again on the street, conventional style. So let's see what this thing is like to ride. All right, folks, here it is, Aprilia's 2021 RSV4 Factory Superbike. This is Aprilia's top-of-the-range, liter and above sized superbike for the 2021 model year. Now, Aprilia's been crafting these RSV4 superbikes in Italy since the 2009 model year. That's when the first RSV4 arrived in the United States. Now, compared to other motorcycle manufacturers, Aprilia has a very interesting way of engineering its superbike. They follow the lines of the engineering and design lines of Porsche, where they make incremental changes every year. They don't do huge wheels up redesigns, total huge makeovers like some other Italian superbike manufacturers and even the Japanese. Instead, they prefer to make incremental changes every year to make the motorcycle more capable. And for 2021, they have a highly capable superbike. Arguably, the last RSV4 was at the top of the superbike heap, and now they've taken a really big step forward. Some of the biggest improvements on this motorcycle is that swing arm. That swing arm, not only does it look cool, but God, does it put the power to the pavement. It's crazy the drives you get off the corner with that swing arm. It really is unbelievable. The bodywork has changed on this motorcycle. The fuel cell is a little bit more narrow. It is a little bit easier to tuck behind when you are in the racing tuck position at the racetrack. This bodywork is all new. That lower cowling is shorter. It's said to make the motorcycle more easy to maneuver from side to side. And my gosh, this motorcycle is ridiculously easy to maneuver from side to side. It's really impressive the amount of agility this sport bike has. LED lighting, thank God, finally. We've wanted LED lighting forever on this bike, and finally for 2021 it has it. It also has the RS660 profile. Some people might not be a big fan of that. I always think it's weird when motorcycle manufacturers copy their premium offering on a less expensive entry. Usually it should be the other way around, but Aprilia has decided to do that with this bike. I like the lines of this motorcycle. It looks more modern, yet it still stays true to the RSV4 game and RSV4 pedigree. Now, this RSV4 Factory is more expensive than the RSV4 base model. RSV4 base model is $19,000. This is $26,000. For that extra cost, you get forged aluminum rims, and Öhlins semi-active suspension. This isn't a gas-charged fork like the tuning fork brand uses on its superbike. This is a more conventional non-gas charged unit, but the suspension adjusts damping in real time based on rider control input or vehicle conditions. It's a really nice setup, and that is what we're going to ride today. So enough talking about it. Let's swing a leg over this thing and tell you what it's like to ride. All right, folks, here we are on the 2021 Aprilia RSV4 Factory, a mechanical key. Yes, I am so happy. I love mechanical keys. And away we go. Sitting on this RSV4 Factory, the thing I like about Aprilia motorcycles, especially its RSV Superbike, is that it always kind of feels the same. So even though Aprilia's been making this motorcycle for 12 years now, and they have made a host of great changes, and the bike has evolved tremendously over its lifespan, these bikes always feel the same. I like
the added width of this front fairing. The front fairing is wider, just like Ducati's Panigale V4, that 2020 Panigale V4. They made it wider, and that not only does a more effective job of blocking air and pushing it around the rider, but it just makes for a more substantial, sizable motorcycle in a positive way. Listen to that engine. 65-degree V4 engine. This engine now displaces 1099 cc. So 1099, up a little bit in displacement, courtesy of 1 millimeter longer piston stroke. Now, Aprilia did this modification in order for the engine to meet more stringent Euro 5 emissions requirements in Europe. So as a bonus, not only does this meet Euro 5, but it also has more power too. Now, horsepower isn't really up. The last time we dynoed this bike, it made 190 ponies at the business end of the 6-inch wide rim shod with Pirelli's Diablo Supercorsa V3 rubber. Supercorsa SP V3, I don't know if I said that. 190 horsepower at the business end of the tire, but really where this engine gains performance is torque. Now, this RSV4 1100, when they went to that bigger capacity engine, that thing already had a ton of torque. But this new 1099cc engine, it is just literally insane how much torque this engine puts out. You could just whack the throttle a third gear at 3,000 RPM and the bike literally lunges forward. So it takes an already very effective power band and makes it even more delicious. Yet, even though you have that added torque, when you get this engine humming up in the rev range, it is crazy how much horsepower this engine delivers. This motorcycle is easily one of the fastest sport bikes made today. Like, I'm talking Hayabusa fast. Like, this motorcycle is fast. So we obviously are gonna like it, and the added torque from the engine just makes a great power band even better. So good job to Aprilia. We are paying attention to the details. So not only does this engine have a ton of power, but just the character of it. This 65-degree V4, the power pulses from the engine, it has such a good, playful, loving character. The character is a little bit more refined. It seems a little bit more high-tech. When you crack open the throttle, the engine before, it's always made a great exhaust note, a great airbox roar, but this 2021 model it refines the sound. The sound is just more tasteful now. The level of engine vibration, you definitely feel engine vibration in the clip-ons, in the foot pegs, but it's a good kind. It adds to the experience of this motorcycle, and I don't really think it's off-putting. Obviously, if you're commuting 100 miles on this bike, the vibration might get to you a little bit, but in a sport application, it just adds to the experience. Now, Aprilia was an early leader in ride-by-wire throttle activation. The original RSV4 back in 2009 had ride-by-wire. Aprilia's really pioneered that technology, and the throttle response on this motorcycle is just magnificent. It's intimate without it being overly sensitive. The electronics on this motorcycle have always performed at a very high level, but the function of the switchgear and the menu navigation was always kind of clunky. Well, Aprilia's done a nice job of cleaning that up. Whoa, when you get this thing that means it goes. they've done a nice job of cleaning that up. You have this new, much larger color TFT display that keeps tabs on the vehicle settings. And we'll show you in a little bit, but when you're at a stop, you can press this button, this thumb actuated button on the right clip-on, and that gets you into the menu, and that allows you to tweak everything. And there's different profiles, so you can set it up for street biking, you can set up for sport biking, and then you can set a user preference mode, so you can tweak all the settings to your liking. And the settings are tied in to the Öhlins semi-active suspension, which this RSV4 Factory comes with. Now, I like the Öhlins semi-active suspension because it just takes the worry out of chassis setup to a certain degree. You just put the bike in the mode you want, and if you want a motorcycle that has a little bit faster rebound, a little bit softer compression settings for general road riding, you can have it. And then conversely, if you want suspension that's a little bit more firm for when you're getting after it in the corners, you can also do that very easily. So I like the tunability and the ability of the suspension to modify the damping settings in real time. We got a little bit of a rear brake squeal with this bike, folks. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can. Let's give her the beans. Yes! Love the way this engine accelerates. I love the sound it makes. This is a very charismatic and exhilarating liter plus size superbike. Let's give her the beans one more time. It's so fun. Yes! Yes! Real quick, folks. That's the mantra of this bike. 0 to 100 real quick. All right, and away we go, folks. Now the cable actuated clutch is very nice. The squeeze to pull in the clutch lever isn't too firm, nor is it too wimpy. The clutch has a good engagement point, and it's generally very pleasing to use. Now, this true 1100cc engine puts power back through a 6-speed gearbox. The gearbox employs an electronic quick shifter. So, the electronic quick shifter allows you to run up and down the gearbox without using the clutch. So all you got to do is press up on that shift lever and the bike goes into the following cog. Conversely, when you're deaccelerating, you just press down on the shift lever and the bike goes into a lower gear. Now, the thing I really like about electronic quick shifters, especially when they have it attached to the downshifting, is it just creates a much improved stability with the rear tire and the pavement. You can downshift really quick, and that little bit of rear shock and chassis instability you typically would get when you're using the clutch and rev matching with the throttle, you don't have that with auto blip. And if you're really wailing around corners, that makes all the difference in the world. All right, we're riding in top gear at 76 miles per hour, and the engine's pulling just under 5,000 RPM. So I like how this engine, the added engine capacity, it can pull top gear without revving out excessively. All right, folks, I'll show you the menu. Hold this button down here, and now we can tune everything to the way we like. We have engine power mode, engine brake, traction control, wheelie control, launch control, ABS, and the suspension mode. Let's put it in street mode. ATC 6, wheelie control 3, with these paddle shifters here on the left clip on. You can use them with your left index finger and your left thumb finger. You can go up and down through the traction control setting. You can also manually disable it by holding it off. Aprilia has done the paddle triggers for on-the-fly traction control adjustment for, I don't know, forever. I think since 2013 or 13, and they have just done such a mighty fine job with it. I love the ability to adjust traction control on the fly, especially when you're riding on the track. It makes all the difference in the world. And not only is it nice that you can make the adjustment, but just the way they position the buttons, it's easy to do. Some of the other motorcycles that offer on-the-fly traction control adjustment, it's not as easy to do because the buttons are just located in not a very intuitive place when you're going Mach 12 at the racetrack. This left index finger, left thumb is just so natural and easy that even if you're focused on the task at hand of just wailing at the racetrack, you still have enough mental capacity to actuate those buttons. And that's an important detail that a lot of companies missed out on, but Aprilia got it right the first time. So good job. Now this windscreen does an adequate job of shielding the rider. Windscreen could be a little bit taller, but I always like extremely tall windscreens. But generally a pretty comfortable street bike to ride. Aprilia lowered the height of the foot peg. The seat's also a little bit lower than before, and that just makes for more room in the cockpit. And this is a fairly comfortable sport bike. Aprilia RSV superbikes have always historically had really small rider favored cockpits. The cockpits have always been designed for small people, but this RSV4 is much more tall rider accommodating. And that's a trend that we're really seeing in the superbike segment. BMW has always been a tall rider friendly bike. Suzuki's always done a good job. Honda's made their bike more tall friendly after making it extremely compact in the 2017 CBR 1000RR. And it's cool to see that Aprilia is following that more inclusive all rider size body type ergonomics package. So very well done. Cruise control. We have cruise control on this bike. Let's turn it on. We have cruise control on. This button right here is how you activate it. And with cruise control on, we can just take our hand off the handlebars. Just joking. But in seriousness, this bike will hold the speed that we want to go. I wish all bikes had cruise control because it's such an awesome feature, and it's good to see that Aprilia finally joining the superbike ranks with cruise control on its RSV4 and RSV4 Factory. Let's bump up the speed a little bit with the cruise control. We rode this vehicle after dark, and it does a very good job of illuminating the road in front of you with the LED headlamps. So for years and years and years, Aprilia did not adopt LED headlamps, but finally for 2021 they've gotten with the program. It was a little bit late, but better late than never. We also have a nice bright LED taillight, and the LED taillight also is tied into the IMU. So if you brake, if the motorcycle senses that it's deaccelerating very quickly, the brake LED will start flashing to alert drivers behind you that you are slowing down quickly. You have to remember, bikes like the RSV4, these bikes offer so much more performance than any vehicle on the road aside from maybe a Bugatti Veyron, that you have to have these little subtle safety aids because these motorcycles just maneuver so quickly that folks in automobiles, they can't even comprehend how quick these motorcycles are in terms of acceleration and deacceleration. So it's cool that Aprilia has integrated that feature into the bike. All right, folks, here we are where the real fun starts. Curvy tarmac. That's where this RSV4 is really shines at. We are riding this motorcycle in the sport setting. So we have engine power in mode 2, which is a medium setting. We have the engine brake in 2, which is the medium setting, ABS in 2, and the semi-active suspension in street mode. And what really impresses me about this motorcycle is just its maneuverability. With a full 4.7 gallons of fuel, this motorcycle weighs 439 pounds. 4.7 gallons of fuel. This bike probably has the largest capacity fuel tank on a sport bike nowadays. Everyone's going to smaller and smaller and smaller fuel capacity, but Aprilia still offers 4.7 gallons of capacity, which I like. You need the extra fuel capacity, however, though, because this engine is thirsty. It is thirsty at the pump. 439 pounds, and this bike is maneuverable. Very easy to put where you want. That was exceptionally understood at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca in the corkscrew. There you need a bike that's very good at side-to-side transition changes, and there is where the Aprilia really shined. Just listen to that engine. This thing sounds so awesome. We are riding on Pirelli's fantastic Diablo Super Corsa SPV3 tires. These tires originally came out for the 2018 model year on Ducati's also brand new Panigale V4. And these tires have now trickled down to the commercial spectrum and are widely available for all models, including this RSV4 Factory. Suspension on this bike. Now, I'm a big fan of this Gen 2 Öhlins semi-active suspenders. The calibration on this Aprilia isn't quite as refined as the calibration on, let's say, the Tuning Fork brand's semi-active suspension. That stuff really gets the bike humming. Now, even in its least aggressive street setting, I really feel a lot of the bumps through the chassis, which isn't a bad thing, but you would think that this bike in this setting would have a little bit more supple action. Still, even with feeling those bumps, the road holding of the suspension, I can't deny its function. This bike has good pitch and control resistance. I just wish it was a little bit more supple. But to be fair, you can always switch to the manual map and tweak the settings to your liking. So if you are a rider who's really picky about the action of the suspension, you can tweak that in the menu system. Now, the brakes on this motorcycle. I just love the brakes on this Aprilia. Powerful Brembo radial mount calipers gripping down on these oversized rotors. And this bike has a lot of stopping power. I also like the rear brake, even though it was a little squeaky. The rear brake has excellent feel. I'm a big rear brake guy, but it's nice to know that this bike has a good rear brake disc. ABS. The ABS programming on these Aprilias, as with all European sport bikes, is very aggressive. You have to be riding this bike at a very high level to even feel the ABS activate. We are riding in ABS mode 2. If you wanted a more or least aggressive ABS setting, ABS level 1 would be good for you. But with ABS 1 active, you can lock up the rear brake. I don't feel like having full manual rear brake control today, so I'm just riding in ABS 2. So if I use the brake too aggressively, I don't have to worry about it locking up or causing any form of instability. And that's what's the really cool thing about bikes like this Aprilia RSV4, is just the level of customization and the level of tunability that's built into these modern superbikes these days. It's just incredible. These bikes can literally go from mild to wild with a couple keystrokes, a couple button strokes, which is totally awesome. Yes! Now this bike has a little bit of propensity to head shake. I also noticed that at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. It's not totally off-putting, but you have to be careful. I don't know if that's a function because the shock spring is just so stiff. I mean, it doesn't feel overly stiff, but it's definitely a little bit stiff. Or because of the aggressive steering geometry. But that is something that you have to pay attention to. There is a steering dampener fitted above the lower top triple clamp, the bottom clamp, and that provides some degree of resistance to head shake, etc. 36 miles per gallon is what we've averaged, so it's a good thing this motorcycle has such a large capacity fuel tank, because you're going to need every drop of the 91 octane. Maintenance wise, aside from the initial 600 mile service, this motorcycle goes 6,200 miles between regular scheduled oil changes, 12,400 miles for valve inspection, valve clearance inspection. It's nice to know that this motorcycle, for as much performance as it offers, it certainly goes the distance. You gotta remember, this is a competition spec engine, but kudos to Aprilia to be able to get the kind of durability they can get with that scheduled maintenance intervals. Now, one curious thing about the naming convention of this bike, Aprilia ditched the 1100 name. Now it's just the RSV4 and RSV4 Factory. But if you look at this top clamp, it still says 1100 Factory. Aprilia probably had a bunch of these top clamps left over, so they just fitted the old top clamp onto this motorcycle. Kind of strange, but we totally get it at the same time. Alright folks, let's walk you through the menu right here. Hold down this toggle. User, Street, Sport. You can adjust all the engine power modes. Engine power mode 1 is the most amount of power. 2 is middle power. 3 is the least amount of power. I like this adjustable engine mode mapping because it really allows you to get comfortable on the motorcycle if you don't have a lot of experience riding liter and above size superbikes. Start with mode 3 and it makes the vehicle just that much more easy to ride. Engine brake control electronically controls the motorcycle deacceleration when you are letting off the throttle. 3 is the most amount of engine brake, 1 is the least. Aprilia traction control, awesome. Aprilia has been kicking butt in the traction control department for years. Wheelie control, launch control, so when you're on the start of a race on the grid, you can put it in launch control. That holds the motorcycle engine at a certain RPM. It allows you just to work on your clutch release for the optimum launch. ABS, we talked about the high level of ABS calibration. ASC, that is the semi-active suspension modes. I like the manual setting the best. Now, to get in the manual setting, what you have to do is you hold this toggle button, vehicle suspension control, and then you can tweak everything from here. Compression, rebound, rear compression, rear rebound, steering dampener, adjustment, a lot of adjustment in this motorcycle, and you can switch every single mode and tweak the suspension damping settings. You can also tweak the global settings of the semi-active suspension in the active modes, which I like. So you can really tweak the way the bike handles. I'm a big fan of this. I'm a big fan of the user interface. This 5-inch color TFT is a big improvement. Good job, Aprilia. We are noticing that you're paying attention to details, so thank you. Well, folks, that was a fun day riding Aprilia's 2021 RSV4 Factory. I really like the improvements Aprilia's done to this motorcycle. I've always been a fanboy of the RSV4, but this step into the 2021 model year has really sharpened the blade of this RSV4. Engine's outstanding, loads of power, tons of character, awesome sound, great electronics. Chassis, this thing it turns so well. I love the chassis on this motorcycle. That swing arm produces tremendous grip. It is unbelievable. I like the styling. I like the broader front fairing. I like the ergonomics package is more accommodating for us 6-foot-tall guys. I like that it has LED headlights, and it's just a very cool looking high performance Italian superbike. I'm not totally sold on the Öhlins semi-active suspension. I do like the wide range of adjustment. I like how easy it is to adjust, but the actual calibration of the spring and the valving, I'm just not a big fan. The suspension rides a little rough for me, and you can get a good setting out of it, but there are other manufacturers with better semi-active suspension setups out there today. All right, folks, let's do some Q&A real quick. How does it compare to the Street Fighter V4S? The Street Fighter V4S is a liter and above size naked bike. This is a liter and above size super bike, so they don't really compare. This would go up against the Panigale V4S. I like this motorcycle better than the Panigale V4S just because it's more friendly. Everything about it is more friendly. The Panigale V4 is awesome, but man, that bike is an aggressive bike. Not saying this bike's not aggressive, but it's just smoother and easier to ride. So I actually like this thing better than the Panigale V4, but the Panigale V4 still kicks butt. Why do they call it factory? They call it factory because this specification comes with the semi-active Öhlins suspension and the lighter alloy forged rims. This bike weighs 6 pounds less than the standard RSV4 at 439 pounds. What's the fuel range? This thing is thirsty. We've been averaging around 36 miles per gallon, which is actually pretty good for this bike. This bike's thirsty. It's a good thing it has that 4.7 gallon capacity fuel tank because you're going to need every last drop on this bike. Does it feel like a major update from the previous bike? Well, it does and it doesn't. Like I said in the introduction, Aprilia has a very methodical way of engineering its RSV4. It doesn't do radical redesigns. It doesn't do total direction changes. It just keeps making small tweaks all the time. And this bike doesn't feel vastly different than the previous RSV4, but it has way more rear grip, courtesy that swing arm. It has way more torque, courtesy that longer stroke engine. And just the user interface is just refined, and the ergonomics are much improved for a taller guy. So I personally think it's a major update from this bike, from the last model, even though it really kind of isn't in a way. Hope that helps, guys. Does it do good wheelies? It does good wheelies, but the throttle response on this bike, it's sensitive in a good way, but these ride-by-wire bikes are always harder to wheelie than the old school mechanical cable actuated throttle bikes. I don't know why it is that way, but it just is. Or maybe I'm getting older, but that's just the deal. All right, folks, would I spend my $26,000 on this RSV4 Factory? I like this bike, but I would not. I'd spend $19,000 on the base model. The suspension from Öhlins, yes, it is nice being able to adjust all the settings electronically. Yes, I always like lighter components, but for that $7,000 upcharge, I just don't like the suspension enough to justify that extra cost. I would 100% buy the $19,000 RSV4 standard model. I would totally buy that motorcycle. This motorcycle is extremely adept at hauling butt, and it looks cool, and it's just a fun bike. All right, folks, that wraps up today's MC Commute on the RSV4 Factory. Make sure to tune in to motorcyclistonline.com. That's where all of my content lives. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs it down if you didn't, and check out our other RSV4 content that we've published on the interwebs. Lots of content there on this model. All right, folks, we'll see you later. Thanks for watching.